We're here to talk, of course, about Breath, your feature film directorial debut, based on, of course, Tim Winton's very popular novel. Does that mean there's an extra sense of pressure since there's an inbuilt fan base for the book, and they sort of have an idea in their head of how this probably looks?
For sure. I mean, the amount of times people have stopped me and said, "You're making a film of that book. That's my favourite book." Yeah, it does sort of, it does add on to the complications of trying to make the film, but at the same time, at least you know that it's a subject and it's a story that a lot of people have identified with and relate to in an emotional and a powerful, visceral way as well. So,
and what drew you to the book in terms of wanting to adapt it for the screen?
It had a pretty profound effect on me. It did bring up and stir a lot of stuff from my past and made me consider a lot of different relationships I had growing up, and obviously the great relationship that I've had and a lot of us have in Australia with the coastline and the ocean specifically, and how that can be the backdrop for those rites of passage that we deal with in the book, and also just on a level of understanding the difference between being a child and an adult and those lines that you cross.
In terms of, I guess, when you get a book and you're putting it on the screen, changes have to get made inevitably. So did you face any particular challenges of like what was going to make it onto the screen, or is it a pretty faithful adaptation in your mind?
Adaptations are tricky because some people analyse a book and then watch the film, and it's sort of like a scorecard between the two. I didn't necessarily want to do that because the book is its own thing. It's an experience with words on a page that you paint the pictures and you put yourself into those pictures that you paint. A film is a very different animal. What I really wanted to do was, more than anything, and if there was a philosophy to take into the adaptation, was to try to make a film that felt similar to the way you felt when you read the book. I was sort of thought if you could capture that feeling, the essence of that feeling, then you're not looking at the punctuation and the grammar of the actual the book, the words and the details of that, but you're capturing more of an essence.
And you're also heavily involved in several key aspects of the film as well. So obviously director, had a hand in writing as well, producer, and of course starred in it. So does that bring an extra, I guess, set of challenges, considering there's, I guess, more than one key responsibility on your plate?
Yeah, look, all those different processes kind of join together in a way, so there's a consistency, and I think from my experience of having worked as an actor in a lot of different films and as a producer on The Mentalist, and being involved in a lot of different levels, a big problem I've found on other films that I've worked on at times, and it's not always the case, but people being on a different page, people telling a different story, slightly different story. So for me to be sort of woven through a lot of that process, it feels like it's all of the one energy. So the tone and the shape of it is all on the right path. The train is on the track and it's moving in the right direction the whole time.
Yeah, and tell me about Tim's involvement as well. Was he quite heavily involved in the, I guess, in this coming to the screen as well?
What was great about Tim is, he gave me a bit of rein over stuff, so he let me run with it. But I knew that we got to a certain point of working together where, conversations where I knew that I had his trust, well enough for me to, go forward and feel confident about what I was trying to do. But he also let me know in a really sort of gentle way that he was there if I needed to talk to him about anything. And he said, look, once I've finished a book, it's no longer mine, it's whoever reads it, so, go for it.
But now you're in the position where you have to give away the film to the audience, and it's I guess a similar feeling of it's no longer yours.
Yeah, the intention behind making the film was to try to make a piece of work that people could identify with and understand and connect with and relate to. So handing it over is that's the litmus test. That's the challenge. That's the exciting part. It is their experience now.
Tell me about the casting process for the film as well. So you've got an amazing cast. Perhaps talk me through casting the key roles of Eva, Looney and Pikelet.
Yeah, well, casting was always, because it's not a big cast, so casting was always going to be a challenge, particularly with the two boys and the physical requirements that we needed to make the film feel authentic. If we consider that the film was set in the mid-70s, there was a physical quality to kids. They weren't playing video games. They weren't sort of Snapchatting and Instagramming on their phones. They were actually out in the environment, challenging themselves in different ways and each other. So I needed kids that could definitely handle themselves physically and could also handle themselves in the water. And it took a year, and we found Samson Coulter, who plays Pikelet, and Ben Spence, who plays Looney.
Mm-hmm. And did either of the boys have acting experience prior to the film?
I think both of them did drama at school, were doing drama at school, but relatively little to none, really. But both, charismatic kids and confident and intelligent, and more than anything, brave. They were not afraid to have a crack.
And tell me about working with Elizabeth Debicki as well for Eva.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth, very different, comes to it, very studied, quite accomplished theatre actress as well, and very focused and professional. And so when she came to shoot, she, with all the actors, I said, look, we're working with these kids. They're raw. I want to keep them raw. It's not going to be like most film sets. It's going to be organic, and we're not going to restrict them or limit them with our kind of process that we normally have with filmmaking. And I think Elizabeth got a lot out of that as well.
And also talking about some of the ocean scenes in the film as well, absolutely stunning. Like some of the surfing footage is just absolutely gobsmacking. Did that provide any particular challenges in terms of shooting out on the ocean?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's fraught with challenges. It's all challenges underlined. It's period challenges. That's it. It's if you think about it like this, when you plan to go to the beach, and you take the family, you pack the car up, you go down to the beach, you get down there, you can't find a park, the wind swings around, there's blue bottles, there's it's too crowded, or it's this, or suddenly a thunderstorm rolls in. Take that and multiply it by 100, and they're the sort of challenges that you have to deal with when you're shooting a film on the ocean. You're at the mercy of Mother Nature, and that's just the way it's going to be.
And what is it about surf culture you think sort of instills such devotion in people as well?
I don't know, how do you articulate it? You can't. But I think as I've gotten older, I've realised how potent that relationship is and has been in my life, and how it's sort of been a constant. My relationship with the ocean is such that, yeah, if I'm away from it for too long, I do really crave it. And there's something about it that is incredibly empowering and incredibly humbling and incredibly alluring and incredibly threatening. It's all of those things.
And the film being set in sort of 1970s Australia, was that fun to kind of like put that up on screen as well? It's sort of quite nostalgic. In certain places, it sort of harkens back to a simpler era for Australia.
The period nature of the film, aesthetically, the production value, what it suggests in the sense that we aren't tied up and tethered to devices and such. It makes it really beautiful and simple and interesting, but the complexity for me lies in the stereotypes of that period when we look back, and sometimes you look back at it and say, yeah, it was a simpler time, but for me there was some sort of masculine stereotypes that are directly associated with the 70s, and particularly within that world. It's a very physical kind of world. I wanted to kind of frame up those stereotypes and then subvert them in a way. So, you know, in essence, it's kind of, I guess I wanted to reveal the detail and the complexity of the other side of that kind of archetype that we've seen so much of, and that we sort of we paint as this simple version, this sort of masculine Australian ideal. It's not as cut and dried as that. You know, there's individuals treat things in different ways, and you know, the film is about identity, and every character in the film is struggling with their own identity in some way. It's trying to figure out who they are and where they fit in. So, yeah, that 70s thing and the sort of machismo of the 70s Australian male is something that I really wanted to subvert in a way, like play around with.
So now that the film is ready to be set loose into the world, how are you feeling about it? Especially since, as I mentioned earlier, you know, you've worn so many hats on this film.
No, it's good. I'm excited about it, and you know, it's like you set a date and you move towards that date, and you know, you can't control people's reactions to it. So you really have to do surrender and give over to handing it over. As an actor, you know, you make a film, you do a little bit of post-production, and then you're off and you do a press junket if you're lucky, and the film comes out and people either see it or they don't. You know, and occasionally someone stops you and says, "Oh, I saw that movie. It sucked," or "You were really good," or whatever. But that's all you've got. But in the position that I'm in with this, I'm sort of curating all the way through and sort of nurturing it through that process. So there's a lot of people involved after the film's made. So that's been a great learning experience for me. But then the actual releasing of the film is, I'm really excited about it because I made it for the Australian audience. And to hand it over is like, I don't know, it's a great privilege.
Well, best of luck with it.
Thank you.
And the film's fantastic, and thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks, mate. Cheers.
All right, cheers.
Thanks a lot.